The Voron Edge Monitoring Station had existed for 312 years without a single historically important event. That was its purpose. Nothing happened there. The station floated in deep black space near the outer border of the Calirian Empire, anchored beside a dead moon that had no atmosphere, no resources, and no strategic value beyond the fact that it sat close enough to the frontier to watch for smugglers or drifting debris. Most officers assigned there considered it a punishment post. Commander Relvas had stopped considering it anything at all years ago. The station was routine, predictable, safe. Every cycle followed the same pattern. Sensor checks, traffic reports, border verification, maintenance logs, sleep. Even the stars outside the observation glass looked repetitive after enough years. At 2:14 station time, Technician Elian was halfway through complaining about recycled coffee quality when the entire sensor grid screamed. Not beeped, not alarmed, screamed. A long metallic shriek erupted through every speaker in the station simultaneously with such force that Elian dropped his cup onto the console. Hot liquid splashed across the floor as red warning lights detonated alive across the control room. For one frozen second, nobody moved. Then every display turned crimson. Commander Voss jerked upright from his command chair. What in hell's was that? Nobody answered because nobody knew. The sound kept going. One endless mechanical scream. Elian's hands flew across his panel. Sensor failure. No, wait. No. Diagnostics are rejecting. Run it again. Voss snapped. I am. More crew flooded into the control room from sleep quarters. Uniforms half-fastened. Faces pale beneath flashing emergency lights. Every border marker from Sector 12 through Sector 31 had activated simultaneously. That was impossible. The sectors stretched across nearly 40,000 kilometers of monitored space. Nothing crossed that much territory unnoticed. Nothing crossed it instantly. Commander Voss stared at the primary display. A single unidentified contact moved through the outer perimeter. No transponder. No registry code. No engine classification. The tracking system labeled it with a designation the station AI had not used in over a century. Unknown mass event. Elian swallowed hard. Commander. Voss didn't look away from the screen. Talk. The readings don't make sense. That's not a useful sentence right now. Elian zoomed the tracking data onto the central display. Several officers went completely silent. The object was moving too fast. Not technically fast. Impossible fast. Voss stepped closer. No. That's what I said. Elian whispered. The object accelerated again. Not gradually. Instantly. Velocity numbers spiked so violently that several tracking graphs simply vanished off-scale. The station AI attempted predictive compensation. Failed. 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 A warning appeared. Known physics model insufficient. The control room became very quiet. Commander Voss felt something cold move slowly through his chest. Visual feed. Lieutenant Mara shook her head immediately. We can't lock clean imaging. Why? I don't know. That's becoming everyone's favorite answer tonight. Mara enlarged the long-range camera feed. Static crawled across the screen. Not normal interference. The signal itself looked wrong. The distortion spread outward around the object like darkness leaking through water. The cameras couldn't hold focus. Sensor pulses vanished the moment they touched the contact. Like the ship was eating them. Voss stared. Ships reflected scans. Even stealth vessels reflected something. Heat, radiation, mass shadows. This thing reflected nothing. It was a hole moving through the stars. How large? He asked quietly. Elian checked the calculations twice before answering. Unknown. That isn't a size. The interference field is distorting the mass readings. Estimate. Elian hesitated. Then, bigger than anything in the Imperial Registry. Nobody spoke after that. Commander Voss slowly lowered himself into his chair. Not because he meant to sit. Because his legs made the decision for him. The object crossed another borderline. Every sensor station across the sector activated emergency status simultaneously. The scream echoing through the room became almost unbearable. Mara looked up from her station. Commander, it's heading toward inhabited systems. How long? At current speed. She stopped. Lieutenant. 14 hours. The room went still again. 14 hours. That was not enough time. Not enough time for fleet mobilization. Not enough time for evacuation. Not enough time for answers. Commander Voss keyed open a priority channel with fingers that suddenly felt heavier than normal. Transmit emergency burst to Fleet Command. Priority level? Voss watched the impossible object continue deeper into Imperial territory without slowing even slightly. Priority 1. Elian inhaled sharply. Nobody used Priority 1 unless worlds were dying. The transmission launched. Across the Empire, relay stations woke one by one as encrypted emergency packets ripped through communication lanes faster than civilian traffic regulations allowed. On the main display, the unidentified vessel accelerated again. Several crew members physically flinched. The new velocity numbers appeared, then disappeared entirely as the system failed to calculate them. Mara whispered something under her breath. Commander Voss didn't ask what, because he already knew. It was the same thought every person in the control room had just realized at the exact same moment. Whatever was entering Imperial space was operating far beyond anything the Empire understood. Then the visual feed flickered. Static tore sideways across the monitor. For half a second, the interference weakened, and the crew finally saw it. A shape emerged from the darkness. Long, black, endless. Not built like a ship. Built like a weapon pointed at the galaxy itself. Then the signal distortion swallowed the image again. The room stayed silent. Commander Voss stared at the empty screen while the warning alarms screamed around him. And somewhere beyond the border, the unknown vessel kept coming. Fleet Admiral Serac Dane was eating breakfast when the emergency transmission arrived. His aide entered the private chamber without permission. That alone told Dane the situation was catastrophic. The Admiral looked up slowly as the data tablet was placed beside his untouched meal. Explain. Priority 1 transmission from Voron Edge Station, sir. Dane frowned immediately. Border stations did not send Priority 1 alerts. Not unless planets were exploding. He activated the report. The first 30 seconds annoyed him. The second 30 seconds confused him. By the second minute, he was standing. By the third minute, the room had become very quiet. The object's velocity logs rolled across the screen. Sensor failures. Unknown mass signatures, interference fields, physics violations, and then the visual capture appeared. One blurred frame, one impossible silhouette, long, dark, wrong. Dane replayed the image 3 times, not because it helped, because his mind refused to accept what he was seeing. Verification. 3 additional stations confirmed identical readings. Dane looked toward the observation window overlooking the capital skyline of Vorath Prime. Morning traffic drifted peacefully between the towers. People below had absolutely no idea something impossible was moving through Imperial space. Get me High Coordinator Talrin immediately. Yes, sir. The aide hesitated. Should I wake the Defense Council? Dane kept staring out the window. Yes. The answer came instantly this time. And activate 3rd Fleet. That made the aide pause. 3rd Fleet was not a patrol force. It was war doctrine given physical form. 48 combat vessels. Planetary siege capability. Enough firepower to erase civilizations. Using them against a single unknown ship felt absurd. Unfortunately, the data no longer allowed room for comfort. 1 hour later, the Defense Council chamber was filled. Ministers, military strategists, intelligence officials, economic coordinators, faces tight with exhaustion and confusion. At the center of the chamber floated the image of the unidentified vessel. Distorted, blurry, still terrifying. High Coordinator Talrin stood silently beneath it. She had governed the Empire through 3 wars and 2 economic collapses. Nothing in her career resembled this. Fleet Admiral Dane finished his briefing. No registry match, he concluded. No confirmed origin. No response to communications. Current trajectory places the object on approach toward the Valoran cluster. Murmurs spread instantly across the chamber. 17 inhabited systems. Nearly 9 billion citizens. Talrin raised one hand. Silence returned. Communication attempts? Continuous, Dane answered. Every known language and emergency frequency. And response? None. Intelligence Minister Vare leaned forward slowly. Could this be a border state prototype? Dane shook his head immediately. No civilization in this region possesses drive technology remotely capable of these numbers. And if they do, then they've surpassed us without leaving a single intelligence trace. Nobody liked that possibility. Counselor Manath spoke next. Could it be autonomous? A drone? Dane asked. Or ancient technology? Dane considered that. No. Why not? The Admiral looked toward the rotating image again. Because it changes acceleration patterns intelligently. He zoomed in on the tracking curves. Whatever this thing is, it knows exactly where it's going. That unsettled the room more than the speed numbers had. Talrin folded her hands behind her back. Time until intercept? Third Fleet will establish contact in approximately 9 hours. Will they stop it? Nobody answered immediately. That silence mattered. Because everyone in the chamber understood military officers. If officers believed victory was guaranteed, they answered quickly. Dane finally spoke. We will attempt interception. Attempt, not guarantee. Several council members noticed the wording. Fear spread quietly across the room like a stain. Talrin noticed too. What aren't you saying, Admiral? Dane exhaled slowly. The object crossed 40,000 kilometers of monitored border space while actively interfering with sensor systems. He enlarged the velocity spikes. These acceleration bursts should not exist. The chamber lights dimmed slightly as the numbers filled the room. Minister Vare stared at them. That has to be wrong. We checked 6 times. Then the instruments malfunctioned. All of them. Silence again. Dane continued. If those readings are accurate, then this vessel can outrun every ship currently in Imperial service. Now the room truly understood the situation. The Empire wasn't preparing to stop the unknown object. The Empire was preparing to ask it politely to stop itself. That realization changed the atmosphere instantly. Talrin looked around the chamber carefully. Evacuation options? Population Minister Saran answered immediately. Impossible within current time frame. How impossible? Catastrophically. Not helpful, but honest. Talrin appreciated honesty. Then we proceed diplomatically. Dane blinked. With respect, Coordinator, we don't know if diplomacy applies here. Talrin turned toward him calmly. Admiral, if a civilization possesses technology capable of those readings, she pointed toward the impossible velocity graphs. Then military escalation becomes mathematics. Nobody spoke, because she was correct. If the unknown ship truly possessed that level of propulsion technology, then its weapons were probably worse. Much worse. Talrin straightened slightly. Maintain communication attempts. Yes, Coordinator. I want every translation AI in the Empire analyzing incoming signals. Yes. I want civilian panic contained. The economic minister laughed once. Nobody joined him. Talrin ignored it. Then another transmission arrived. Fresh sensor data from Third Fleet. The chamber darkened again as tactical projections filled the room. 48 Imperial warships moving into intercept formation. And beyond them, the unknown vessel continued forward. No evasive action. No change in heading. No reduction in speed. It simply kept coming. Like the largest military mobilization in the Empire meant absolutely nothing to it. Admiral Dane watched the tactical display carefully. Then something cold settled into his stomach. It knows we're there. Talrin looked at him. Explain. Our fleet signatures are impossible to miss. The realization spread slowly across the chamber. The unknown vessel had already detected the entire intercept force. And it had not altered course even 1 degree. Not fear. Not caution. Not even curiosity, just calm forward movement. Toward the Empire. Toward inhabited worlds. Toward the waiting fleet. Dane stared at the black silhouette drifting across the tactical projection. For the first time in 32 years of military service, Fleet Admiral Sirac Dane experienced a feeling he had almost forgotten existed. Helplessness. Far out in the darkness between stars, the unknown vessel continued its silent approach, and Third Fleet moved to meet it. Third Fleet assembled faster than any fleet mobilization in Imperial history. 48 warships emerged from fold space in perfect formation above the Helios Drift staging sector, their engine trails burning blue against the darkness like lines carved into space itself. Destroyers, carrier platforms, siege cruisers, interceptor wings. Enough military force to conquer smaller civilizations. At the center floated the flagship, Iron Dominion, a fortress nearly 12 kilometers long. Its spinal cannon alone could crack continents. Admiral Cale Varen stood on the command bridge with both hands behind his back, watching the fleet finalize formation patterns across the tactical display. Every ship waited for orders. Every crew member understood the same thing. Nobody knew if this would become first contact, or the first battle of extinction. Distance to target? Varen asked. For 100,000 kilometers and closing, Navigation Officer Sarah replied. Target velocity? She hesitated. Still impossible, sir. A few nervous laughs appeared around the bridge. Not because it was funny, because fear sometimes escaped through humor. Varen didn't smile. Visual confirmation? Partial. The main display activated. Static crawled across the screen. Sensor distortion rippled violently around the unknown vessel. Then the interference stabilized for half a second, and the bridge fell silent. The ship was enormous. Not wide. Long. Painfully long. Like someone had built a spear designed to stab through reality itself. Its surface absorbed light strangely, drinking in nearby starlight instead of reflecting it. No visible engines. No running lights. No weapon ports. No markings. Just a black shape moving through the stars with impossible calm. Lieutenant Sarah swallowed. It's not slowing down. Varen already knew that. The fleet sat directly in the vessel's projected path. 48 warships formed a literal wall of firepower between the object and Imperial territory. Anything rational would stop, or turn, or acknowledge the fleet existed. The dark vessel did none of those things. Kept coming. Steady. Silent. Unhurried. Like the Empire itself was merely weather. Open communication channels again, Varen ordered. Yes, Admiral. Across every known frequency, the transmission repeated. Unidentified vessel, you have entered Imperial territory. Reduce speed and identify yourself immediately. Silence answered. The message repeated in military codes, trade dialects, ancient relay languages, emergency mathematical patterns. Nothing. The vessel continued forward. Officer Sarah checked the distance again. 300,000 kilometers. Still no change in course. Still no response. Still no visible concern. Something about that terrified Varen more than open hostility would have. An enemy preparing for battle made sense. This did not. Admiral, Science Officer Tail said quietly, we're detecting active sensor suppression around the target. Meaning, it's controlling the interference intentionally. That drew attention immediately. You're certain? Yes. Tail enlarged the readings. The distortion patterns adapt whenever our scans intensify. Varen stared at the data. The unknown ship wasn't merely blocking sensors. It was choosing what the Empire could see. That realization sent cold silence across the bridge. Distance. 200,000 kilometers. Varen made a decision. All ships hold formation. Several officers looked toward him immediately. The Admiral kept his eyes on the tactical screen. If it intends hostile action, we force response confirmation here. Sir, Tail said carefully. If those weapon energy estimates are accurate, I know. And he did know. The earlier sensor logs from the border stations still disturbed him. Whatever reactor powered that vessel operated at levels beyond military doctrine. But retreating now would communicate weakness. Empires survived through confidence. Even when confidence became theater. Target approaching intercept line, Sarah announced. The bridge lights dimmed automatically as combat systems armed themselves throughout the fleet. 48 warships prepared firing solutions. Missile arrays activated. Shield grids intensified. Spinal cannons charged. The darkness ahead remained completely still. No shields visible. No weapons charging. No response. Just that impossible ship moving forward. Distance. 100,000 kilometers. Still coming. 70,000. Still coming. Somewhere deeper inside himself, Admiral Varen began realizing something horrible. The unknown vessel did not view Third Fleet as a threat. That was the only explanation left. No civilization capable of fear behaved this calmly while flying directly into maximum military engagement range. The realization tightened around his chest slowly. Admiral! Sarah's voice had changed. Varen looked up. The target vessel had altered orientation slightly. Not evasive movement. Not attack posture. It simply rotated with smooth mechanical precision until its forward section pointed directly toward the Iron Dominion. Toward the flagship. Energy readings exploded across the bridge. Contact spike. Reactor surge detected. Energy output climbing. Every display flooded crimson. Warning alarms screamed. Tail stared at his console in disbelief. That's a weapon. How strong? Tail looked horrified. I don't know. That answer terrified the bridge more than any number could have. Because military sensors always estimated something. This time they couldn't. The energy buildup climbed higher. 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 Then stabilized. Every officer on the bridge understood the message instantly. The unknown vessel could fire. Right now. Directly at the flagship. And it wanted the fleet to know that. No shot came. No attack. No aggression. The weapon simply remained charged. Like a hand resting calmly beside a holstered gun. Varen felt sweat along his spine. Not because he thought the enemy might fire. Because he suddenly understood that if it wanted to, Third Fleet might already be dead. The energy signature held for 6 full seconds. Then slowly faded. The vessel rotated back toward its original heading. And continued forward. Like nothing had happened. No attack. No communication. Just calm, unstoppable movement through Imperial space. The bridge remained silent for several seconds after the energy readings disappeared. Finally Sarah whispered, "It warned us." Admiral Varen stared at the dark vessel crossing directly through the fleet formation. Past 48 armed warships. Past the Empire's strongest military response. Untouched. Unafraid. Unstoppable. And for the first time in his entire career, Admiral Kale Varen chose not to fire. "Maintain shadow formation," he ordered quietly. No one argued, because every officer on the bridge had reached the same conclusion at the exact same moment. If the Empire attacked that ship, the Empire might lose. The emergency council chamber had not slept in 30 hours. Food containers covered the long strategy table. Half-drunk cups of stimulant sat forgotten beside glowing data screens. Military officers rotated in and out with fresh reports while exhausted analysts argued over sensor logs that nobody truly understood. At the center of the room, High Coordinator Talrin stood staring at the latest transmission from Third Fleet. The footage replayed again. The unknown ship turning. The weapon charge building. The fleet freezing in place. Then the weapon powering down without firing. Silence filled the chamber. Finally, Intelligence Minister Orvek spoke. It demonstrated capability. Military Counselor Drays snapped back immediately. It threatened us. No, Orvek replied calmly. If it intended destruction, Third Fleet would already be debris. Several officers shifted uncomfortably. Because that possibility had entered everyone's thoughts hours ago. Talrin replayed the footage once more. The unknown vessel had done something psychologically devastating. It had proven superiority, without violence. That was worse. An enemy you could hate was manageable. An enemy choosing restraint while holding overwhelming power created uncertainty. And uncertainty terrified governments. What about the signal? Talron asked. Translation teams across the Empire had been dissecting the mysterious 11-second transmission the vessel sent before the weapon demonstration. Lead linguist Sarov looked exhausted enough to collapse. We've confirmed structure consistency. Meaning, it's definitely language. The room grew quieter. Sarov enlarged wave pattern diagrams across the central display. Repeating tonal structures indicate grammar formation. Can you translate it? No. How long? We don't know. Talron rubbed her temples slowly. The Empire possessed translation archives containing over 600 documented languages. Nothing matched this one. Not even partially. The unknown signal had no recognizable linguistic roots. No shared syntax. No evolutionary overlap. It was entirely alien. That realization carried terrifying implications. Not neighboring civilization alien. Not hidden border civilization alien. Something farther. Much farther. Minister Orvek leaned forward. Replay the signal. The room speakers activated. A strange sequence of layered tones filled the chamber. Deep harmonic pulses intertwined with sharp rhythmic bursts. Beautiful. Cold. Impossible to interpret. Yet undeniably intelligent. The signal ended with a rising tonal pattern. Orvek narrowed his eyes slightly. Again. The signal replayed. Then again. Then once more. Counselor Dre's finally snapped. What exactly are we listening for? Orvek ignored him. Again. The chamber obeyed. This time Orvek stood slowly. Something had changed in his expression. Not fear. Recognition. That ending, he said quietly. Talron looked up. What about it? The tonal rise. Sarov blinked. You noticed it too? The lead linguist quickly expanded the final waveform section. It changes pitch upward before termination. So? Sarov hesitated. In nearly every known language structure, rising terminal tone indicates interrogative intent. Silence spread across the room. Talron stared at him. You're saying? Sarov swallowed. We believe the signal may have been a question. Nobody spoke, because the implication hit all at once. The unknown vessel entered Imperial territory, attempted communication, and the Empire responded with warships. Counselor Dre's broke the silence harshly. That's speculation. No, Orvek said quietly. That's pattern recognition. Talron looked back toward the tactical display showing the dark ship moving deeper into Imperial space while Third Fleet shadowed helplessly behind it. What kind of question? Sarov shook his head. We don't know yet. But you're certain it wasn't hostile? The linguist hesitated too long. No language analysis can confirm emotional intent, he admitted. But structurally, it doesn't resemble a threat. That made the room somehow even more uncomfortable. Because suddenly the Empire's actions looked different. Much different. Talron slowly sat for the first time in hours. Outside the chamber windows, Vorith Prime glowed peacefully beneath morning light. Millions of civilians continued normal life completely unaware that their government might have nearly provoked an interstellar disaster through misunderstanding. The thought chilled her. A new transmission interrupted the silence. Fleet Admiral Varen appeared on the central screen. His face looked older than it had yesterday. Coordinator. Report. The vessel has reduced speed by approximately 30%. That startled the chamber immediately. Reason. Unknown. Hostile action? None. Varen paused slightly. There's more. Talron straightened. Go on. The vessel has begun active scanning. Science data flooded onto the chamber displays. Massive pulse waves expanding outward from the unknown ship in perfect intervals. Star compositions. Radiation patterns. Gravitational mapping. Mineral scans. The vessel wasn't targeting military systems. It was studying the region itself. Like a survey ship, Orvek stared at the data slowly. That's not invasion behavior. No. Varen agreed quietly. It isn't. Talron looked toward the blinking tactical projection. The dark vessel continued moving steadily through Imperial space. Silent, patient, observing everything. "What exactly is it doing?" she asked. Varen answered after a long pause. "Honestly," the Admiral looked genuinely unsettled. "It looks like exploration." That word changed the room completely, because suddenly a terrifying possibility emerged. Not a warship entering Imperial space. An explorer. A civilization so advanced their exploration vessels could overpower entire fleets accidentally. Talrin felt the scale of that thought settle heavily onto her shoulders. If this was merely an exploration ship, then what did their military look like? Nobody in the chamber wanted the answer. Another analyst rushed into the room carrying fresh reports. "Coordinator, public networks are leaking the story." Talrin closed her eyes briefly. Of course they were. Impossible events never stayed secret. How bad? 3 major news channels confirmed fleet mobilization. And the civilians? The analyst hesitated. Panic indicators rising. Across the Empire, rumors were already spreading. Unknown invaders. Collapsing border defenses. Failed military intercepts. Extinction theories. Fear moved faster than facts ever could. Talrin looked again at the tactical display. The dark vessel continued onward calmly, while an entire galactic empire spiraled into confusion around it. Then Orvek spoke softly. "If it truly asked us a question," the old intelligence minister looked around the chamber, "we may have answered very badly." Panic reached the capital before sunrise. By midday, every public network in the Empire displayed the same blurred image. A long black silhouette against the stars. The unknown ship became the only thing anyone talked about. Markets fluctuated violently. Civilian transport lanes overloaded. Schools closed early as frightened parents rushed children home. Emergency inquiry channels collapsed under billions of simultaneous calls asking the same question. Are we under attack? Unfortunately, the government could not answer honestly, because the honest answer was, "We don't know," and uncertainty frightened populations more than confirmed war ever could. High Coordinator Talrin delivered her 3rd public address in 12 hours. She stood before the Imperial Seal with perfect posture and controlled calm. "Citizens of the Empire," she began, "the unidentified vessel currently moving through Imperial territory remains under observation by 3rd Fleet. At this time, no hostile actions have occurred. Technically true. Strategically useless. The public wanted certainty. Talrin had none to give. Our military remains fully operational," she continued carefully, "and communication attempts are ongoing. Across the Empire, billions listened. Very few felt reassured, because the networks had already discovered enough leaked military footage to understand something terrible. 3rd Fleet had not stopped the vessel. It had merely survived meeting it. Far deeper in Imperial territory, Admiral Varen stood on the bridge of the Iron Dominion watching the unknown vessel continue its silent journey. The distance between the fleet and the target remained carefully maintained. Not tactical. Psychological. No one aboard 3rd Fleet wanted to get closer. The vessel moved at reduced speed now. Still faster than anything Imperial engineering could produce. But slower than before. Almost patiently slower. "Scanning pulses increasing again," Science Officer Tail reported. The bridge display expanded outward. Wave after wave of sensor energy spread from the dark ship in perfectly measured intervals. The pulses touched asteroid fields, radiation clouds, nearby moons, abandoned satellites, the fleet itself. Yet nothing aggressive emerged from the scans. No target locking, no weapons tracking, just observation. The unknown vessel was studying the galaxy around it like a scientist entering a new ecosystem. Varen still didn't know whether that comforted or terrified him more. Then Communications Officer Cell reported something strange. "Admiral receiving civilian distress beacon. Source: outer mining route near the Ash Era belt." A flashing marker appeared on the tactical display. One small civilian freighter. Disabled. Drifting. Drive failure. The beacon had apparently been broadcasting for 16 hours. Nobody noticed earlier because the fleet had been focused entirely on the unknown vessel. "Dispatch rescue corvette," Varen ordered immediately. Before the command could process, Tail suddenly froze at his console. "Admiral," Varen turned sharply. "The vessel is changing course." Every eye on the bridge snapped toward the tactical display. The dark ship rotated slowly, smoothly, gracefully, like an animal moving through water. Then it began heading directly toward the stranded civilian freighter. Nobody spoke. The bridge became silent enough to hear breathing. "Target destination confirmed," Cell whispered. It heard the distress beacon. The unknown vessel accelerated slightly. Not attack speed. Not military maneuvering. Something gentler. Intentional restraint. Varen stared in disbelief. Why would an unknown supervessel care about one broken civilian transport? Nothing about the situation made sense anymore. The dark ship reached the asteroid field within minutes. Third Fleet followed cautiously from distance. Visual feeds stabilized slightly as the vessel entered the mineral-dense region. For the first time since the crisis began, the Empire saw the unknown ship clearly. And the image disturbed Varen deeply. Not because it looked aggressive, because it didn't. The vessel looked functional, purpose-built, scarred in places, like something designed for long journeys rather than conquest. No decorative armor plating. No intimidation displays. No imperial symbolism. Just practicality scaled to terrifying size. "It's slowing further," Tail reported. The dark ship carefully maneuvered between drifting asteroids with astonishing precision. Then it stopped beside the stranded freighter. The civilian vessel looked microscopic beside it. A tiny metal insect beside a mountain. No weapons activated. No boarding craft launched. Nothing hostile happened. The dark ship simply remained there motionless for nearly 2 minutes. Varen leaned forward slowly. "What is it doing?" Then Cell's eyes widened. "It's transmitting. Signal type. Civilian frequency." That shocked the bridge. "Translation." Cell looked confused. "It's using standard trade language." Every officer stared at him. "That's impossible," Tail said immediately. "The vessel only received language samples yesterday." "I know." Replay transmission. The bridge speakers activated. A calm, unfamiliar voice filled the command deck. Clear. Even. Surprisingly ordinary. "Merchant vessel. We are receiving your distress signal. Please confirm crew status and engine condition." Nobody on the bridge moved. The words echoed through the room like reality malfunctioning. The unknown vessel had learned Imperial trade language in less than 2 days. Not perfectly, but functionally. The civilian freighter responded shakily. "For life signs aboard. Drive failure. Limited power." The calm voice listened carefully, asked follow-up questions, clarified technical details, then said, "Understood. We can assist." Varen sat down slowly, not intentionally. Again his body made the decision before his mind caught up. Because the thing every officer aboard Third Fleet feared most was currently helping stranded civilians. On screen, a section of the dark ship opened. Not a weapon port, not a missile bay. A docking mechanism extended outward slowly and carefully toward the damaged freighter. The movement was unbelievably delicate for something so enormous. "It's towing them," Cell whispered. The docking arm connected gently. Tiny maneuvering thrusters adjusted position with impossible precision. Then the dark vessel slowly guided the civilian ship free from the asteroid field like a parent helping a child cross dangerous water. Nobody aboard Third Fleet spoke during the rescue. Not one officer. Because something fundamental had just changed. The Empire's terrifying unknown intruder, the unstoppable black vessel that crossed borders, ignored fleets, and demonstrated impossible weapons, had stopped its journey to save civilians it had never met. And suddenly Admiral Varen realized the most frightening possibility of all. Maybe the Empire had misunderstood everything. The rescue operation lasted 23 minutes. 23 minutes during which the most powerful fleet in the Empire watched in absolute silence as the unknown vessel carefully guided a damaged civilian freighter to safety. No threats. No aggression. No demands. Just calm, controlled assistance. The dark ship released the freighter into stable orbit outside the asteroid field and slowly retracted its docking arm. Then it waited. Almost politely, Admiral Varen stared at the tactical display while dozens of thoughts collided violently inside his head. Nothing about this matched invasion behavior. Nothing. Yet the vessel still possessed enough power to erase Third Fleet if it chose to. That contradiction had become impossible to ignore. "Admiral," Cell said quietly. "Incoming transmission." "The freighter." Cell shook his head slowly. "No, sir." His voice changed slightly. "It's hailing us." Every officer on the bridge looked up. Varen straightened carefully. "Audio only." The speakers activated. A new voice filled the bridge. Different from the rescue operator. Still calm. Still controlled. Still speaking rough but understandable trade language. And somehow that made the moment even stranger. Because terrifying things were not supposed to sound reasonable. "Imperial fleet vessels, we've been attempting communication for approximately 2 of your planetary rotations. Nobody moved." The voice continued. "We apologize for crossing your territorial boundary without authorization. We genuinely did not understand the regional markers." Absolute silence consumed the bridge. The unknown vessel continued speaking calmly. "Our navigational charts for this sector appear incomplete. We would appreciate an opportunity to discuss the situation somewhere that does not involve active weapons systems." Several officers slowly exchanged looks. Varen felt his heartbeat becoming strangely heavy. The voice paused briefly, then added, "We suspect you probably have questions." A few stunned officers almost laughed from disbelief. Questions? The Empire had spent 48 hours preparing for possible extinction. Varen activated his command channel carefully. "This is Fleet Admiral Kale Varen of the Calirian Third Fleet." A short pause answered him. Then, "Understood, Admiral Varen." No hostility. No arrogance. Just acknowledgement. Varen kept his tone measured. "Identify yourself immediately." Another small pause. Not fearful. Not hesitant. More like someone organizing information. Then the answer came. "My name is Captain Elena Ward." The bridge remained silent. Species designation. Human. Nobody recognized the term. Not one officer. The voice continued. Vessel designation. Exploration ship Odyssey Dawn. Exploration ship. The phrase hit the bridge harder than any weapon demonstration had. Because if this was merely an exploration vessel, what kind of civilization built it? Captain Ward continued speaking. "We originated from the Sol system approximately 3 years ago by our local timescale. We were conducting long-range exploratory surveys beyond mapped space." Varen stared at the tactical display. 3 years. This ship had traveled beyond known galactic charts for 3 years. And survived. The implications were horrifying. "Your vessel entered sovereign imperial territory without authorization," Varen said carefully. "Yes," Captain Ward replied immediately. "That part has become very obvious in hindsight." Several officers blinked. The tone was almost embarrassed. Not threatening. Embarrassed. Varen struggled to reconcile that with the ship capable of overpowering entire fleets. "You ignored our warning shots." A slight pause answered him. Then, "Respectfully, Admiral, your fleet fired first." Nobody on the bridge spoke. Because technically, she was correct. The captain continued calmly. "When unknown military vessels formed an armed blockade around us, we considered the situation potentially hostile. We demonstrated defensive capability to discourage escalation." Defensive capability. That was how she described the weapon charge that nearly overloaded Imperial sensors. Like it was standard procedure. Varen felt the scale difference between civilizations widening with every sentence. "You threatened my flagship." "No, Admiral. We demonstrated that attacking us would be ineffective." The answer came instantly. Not aggressive. Not apologetic. Just factual. And somehow that honesty disturbed Varen more than intimidation would have. Captain Ward continued. We did not fire because we had no interest in harming anyone. We were trying to communicate. Silence spread across the bridge again. 2 days of fear. Fleet mobilization. Government panic. Civilian unrest. And according to the unknown captain, all of it began because her crew got lost. Varen pressed fingers slowly against the bridge railing. You expect us to believe that? A very small pause followed. Then something subtle entered Captain Ward's voice for the first time. Not anger. Amusement. Admiral, we stopped to rescue one of your civilians in the middle of a military standoff. Nobody had a response ready for that. Because again, she was correct. The channel remained quiet briefly. Then another voice entered the transmission. High Coordinator Talrin. She had been listening remotely from the emergency council chamber the entire time. Captain Ward, Talrin said calmly. This is High Coordinator Talrin of the Imperial Council. Good to finally speak with someone officially, Ward replied. Talrin ignored the implication politely. You claim your vessel entered our territory accidentally. Correct. You possess technology significantly beyond anything currently known to our civilization. A pause. I suppose that depends how large your currently known civilization is. That answer silenced the chamber monitoring the call. Because suddenly another terrifying possibility emerged. What if humanity wasn't simply advanced? What if humanity came from somewhere vastly larger than the Empire itself? Talrin chose her next words carefully. Captain Ward, exactly how far from home are you? This time the pause lasted longer. When Ward answered, her voice became quieter somehow. Not fearful, just thoughtful. Honestly, another short silence. Farther than we intended. The tactical display showed the impossible black vessel drifting silently beside the rescued civilian freighter. A ship powerful enough to terrify empires. A ship built for journeys beyond known space. A ship carrying explorers who sounded strangely normal despite technology that bordered on godlike. And slowly, for the first time since the crisis began, the Empire realized something extraordinary. The unknown vessel was not a warship searching for conquest. It was a lost ship trying to find its way home. The emergency council chamber stayed silent for almost 12 full seconds after Captain Ward's final sentence. Farther than we intended. Nobody in the room knew how to process it, because the phrase sounded so ordinary, like travelers discussing a wrong turn. Not the crew of a vessel powerful enough to overpower an empire accidentally. High Coordinator Talrin slowly sat back down. For the first time in 2 days, the fear inside the chamber had changed shape. The terror of invasion was fading. Something else was replacing it. Scale. The Empire was beginning to realize it might not understand how large the universe actually was. Talrin activated the secure diplomatic channel again. Captain Ward, how extensive is human territory? A brief pause followed. Then Ward answered carefully. That's a difficult question. Not reassuring. Several council members exchanged nervous looks. Ward continued, human governance structures are decentralized. There isn't one unified territorial authority controlling all exploration sectors. Military Counselor Drays frowned immediately. You don't have a central government? We do, Ward replied calmly. Several, actually. That answer made things worse. Talrin leaned forward slowly. Several. Human political history is complicated. Even through imperfect translation software, the understatement somehow survived. Ward continued. The vessel you encountered belongs to the Outer Survey Coalition operating under the Sol Expeditionary Charter. The council chamber became quiet again. None of those words meant anything to Imperial records. Sol. Coalition. Expeditionary Charter. Unknown systems. Unknown organizations. Unknown civilizations. The Empire's star maps suddenly felt very small. Talrin glanced toward Intelligence Minister Orvek. The old strategist already understood the same horrifying implication she did. If humanity possessed multiple governments, exploration coalitions, deep space survey fleets, technology beyond imperial comprehension, then humanity likely occupied a civilization network vastly larger than anything the Empire had imagined existed. Ward's voice returned through the channel. Based on your reaction, I'm guessing we're well outside your explored sectors. Orvek answered this time. Captain, our civilization has mapped approximately 32,000 inhabited systems. Pause followed. Then Ward said quietly, "Oh, nothing else. Just, oh." That single word disturbed the chamber more than panic ever had, because it sounded like someone realizing they had accidentally driven much farther into unfamiliar territory than expected. Not awe, not intimidation, mild surprise. Counselor Drays finally snapped. You crossed into our territory with a vessel capable of overwhelming entire fleets, and you're acting like this is some navigational inconvenience? Ward answered immediately. Counselor, from our perspective your fleet opened fire less than 12 hours after first contact. Drays went silent. Again because technically, she was correct. Ward's tone remained calm. We demonstrated defensive capability because your military response escalated rapidly. We did not retaliate because we understood your reaction was fear-based. Several officers visibly stiffened at that phrasing. Fear-based, not strategically threatening, not tactically impressive. Fearful. The psychological imbalance between civilizations became more obvious with every sentence. Talrin redirected quickly. Captain Ward, how many vessels like yours exist? This time the pause lasted noticeably longer. When Ward answered, her tone became more careful. Exploration-class vessels? Yes. Hundreds. The room froze. Military officers looked physically ill. Third Fleet, the greatest military force in the Empire, had barely survived interaction with one. And there were hundreds. Ward clarified quickly. Most are smaller than Odyssey Dawn. Our vessel was designed for extended deep-field autonomy. Nobody found that comforting. Orvek spoke quietly. Captain, your ship crossed regions our science academies consider impossible to navigate. Ward sounded genuinely surprised. Impossible? Yes. Another pause. Then, that explains several things. Talrin closed her eyes briefly. The humans weren't merely technologically superior. They operated using entirely different assumptions about reality itself. The Empire's understanding of distance, exploration, and physics might simply be outdated. That realization hit harder than military inferiority, because weapons gaps could eventually close. Civilizational perspective gaps were much worse. Ward spoke again. For what it's worth, your border systems are impressive. Several council members blinked. Talrin almost laughed from exhaustion. The humans had crossed impossible distances using godlike technology, and were complementing border infrastructure. The absurdity nearly broke the room psychologically. Then Ward added something that changed everything again. But your warning systems triggered much earlier than we expected. Talrin narrowed her eyes. Expected. A slight hesitation. Then, there are regions farther rimward where vessels disappear without any warning at all. Silence returned instantly. Orvek spoke slowly. What kind of regions? Ward answered carefully this time. The kind exploration crews avoid discussing casually. Nobody in the chamber liked that answer. At all. The implication hung in the air like poison. Humanity possessed vessels powerful enough to terrify empires, and apparently those vessels still feared something else farther out in deep space. Talrin suddenly understood another horrifying truth. The Odyssey Dawn might not have been built as an intimidation platform. It might have been built for survival. That thought rearranged the crisis entirely. Because if humanity required ships this advanced merely to explore safely, then what exactly existed beyond known space? Ward interrupted the silence gently. Coordinator Talrin. May I ask something directly? Talrin steadied herself. Yes. Another small pause. Then, why did your civilization react with military force before attempting close-range communication? Several members of the chamber looked embarrassed immediately. Talrin answered honestly. Because we were afraid. Ward did not respond for several seconds. When she finally spoke, Her voice sounded strangely softer. That makes sense. No mockery. No superiority. Just understanding. And somehow that made the Empire feel even smaller. Outside the council chamber, billions across Imperial space still watched terrified news broadcasts about the mysterious black vessel. They still believed humanity might destroy them. Inside the chamber, the leadership had begun realizing something far stranger. Humanity had not arrived as conquerors. Humanity had simply wandered beyond the edge of the map. And the map itself was much smaller than anyone imagined. The first face-to-face meeting was arranged 12 hours later. Neutral space. No active weapons. Minimal escorts. At least officially. Unofficially, Third Fleet remained positioned less than 20 minutes away with every combat system armed. Not because Admiral Varen expected betrayal anymore. Because nobody knew how to emotionally process beings capable of casually crossing impossible distances. The meeting platform itself was an old diplomatic transfer station orbiting a frozen moon near the Helion Drift. And used for decades. Small, quiet, safe. Or at least it had felt safe before humanity appeared. Now every officer stepping through its corridors felt painfully aware that safety might simply be relative. Admiral Varen arrived first with a reduced delegation. Science Officer Tail, Linguist Sarov, 2 diplomatic aides. For security personnel, the station felt unnaturally silent. Everyone waited. Then long-range sensors detected the human shuttle approaching. Every monitor in the station focused on it instantly. Compared to the massive Odyssey Dawn, the shuttle looked ordinary. Compact, angular, practical. No glowing weapons. No dramatic displays. Just efficient engineering. That disturbed Varen almost as much as the larger vessel had. Because truly advanced civilizations no longer needed intimidation aesthetics. The shuttle docked smoothly. Airlock seals engaged. And for several seconds nobody moved. Then the inner door opened. The first humans stepped into Imperial history. Captain Elena Ward looked disappointingly normal. That was the terrifying part. Not taller than expected. Not armored. Not biologically monstrous. Just a woman in a dark exploration uniform carrying a data tablet under one arm. Behind her came a gray-haired engineer, a younger navigation officer, another human carrying portable translation equipment. No visible weapons. No military posture. Captain Ward looked around the station with open curiosity. Then smiled politely. Coordinator Talron? The High Coordinator stepped forward slowly. Yes. Ward extended one hand casually. Several Imperial guards tensed instantly. The human paused awkwardly. Right? Sorry. Different customs. Talron looked at the offered hand carefully before imitating the gesture. The handshake lasted 2 seconds. And somehow the simplicity of it unsettled everyone watching. Because after 2 days of panic and military escalation, first contact began with a greeting so ordinary it almost felt absurd. Ward smiled slightly. It's genuinely nice to finally meet someone without sensor interference involved. Nobody knew how to answer that. The humans followed the delegation into the conference chamber. Imperial officers watched them constantly, studying movement, behavior, speech patterns, trying desperately to reconcile ordinary appearance with impossible capability. The contradiction refused to settle comfortably in anyone's mind. Once seated, Talron began carefully. Captain Ward, there are still many things we don't understand. Ward nodded immediately. I assumed there would be. Your vessel alone represents technological capabilities beyond our scientific models. Ward exchanged a glance with her engineer, then said something that froze the room. Actually, Odyssey Dawn is considered relatively outdated. Silence. Nobody even tried hiding their reactions anymore. Tail finally spoke. Outdated. Ward nodded apologetically. Exploration ships prioritize durability over speed optimization. Most modern transit vessels travel significantly faster. Several Imperial officers physically stopped writing notes. Faster? The Odyssey Dawn already violated known physics. Ward noticed their expressions and paused. That sounded worse out loud than I intended. It absolutely had. Talrin steadied the conversation. Captain, why build a vessel this powerful for exploration? Ward leaned back slightly, and for the first time since first contact, the human expression changed. Not amusement, not diplomacy, memory. We travel very far from home, she said quietly. The room listened carefully. Ward continued. When humanity first expanded beyond local systems, we learned something important very quickly. Her fingers rested lightly against the table. Space is not empty. Nobody interrupted. Ward's voice became calmer, professional, like someone explaining difficult truths to children. There are regions where stars behave incorrectly, places where navigation systems fail without explanation, signal shadows, gravitational dead zones, areas where ships disappear and never transmit again. The room became completely still. Even the guards stopped moving. Ward continued carefully. Exploration vessels are built to survive long enough to return home. Suddenly the Odyssey Dawn made terrifying sense. Its weapon systems, defensive fields, sensor suppression, impossible durability, might not exist for war. They existed because something farther out in deep space required them. Talrin felt cold. Captain, what exactly is out there? Ward hesitated. A real hesitation this time. Then, we honestly don't know everything. Not reassuring. At all. Ward looked toward the station viewport where distant stars glowed silently. Human exploration has mapped incredible regions. Beautiful ones too. But the farther outward you go. She stopped briefly. The stranger reality becomes. Nobody spoke after that. Because suddenly the Empire's entire understanding of civilization shifted violently. They had believed themselves advanced, established, powerful. Now they were sitting across a table from explorers casually discussing horrors beyond map space. And those explorers had arrived accidentally. Tail finally asked the question everyone feared. If your exploration ships require this level of capability, he glanced toward the distant silhouette of Odyssey Dawn visible beyond the station. What does your military look like? The human engineer laughed once accidentally. Ward immediately gave him a sharp look. Daniel. Sorry. The room remained frozen. Because nobody missed the implication hidden inside that reaction. Ward exhaled softly. Human military policy is complicated. That was not an answer. Which meant the real answer was probably much worse. Talrin chose a different direction. Captain Ward. Why continue exploring if the outer regions are so dangerous? For the first time, the humans smiled. Not politically, not carefully, genuinely. Ward answered quietly, because that's what humans do. Something about the simplicity of that sentence affected the room deeply. Not arrogance, not conquest, curiosity. Humanity crossed impossible darkness because they wanted to know what existed beyond it. That realization finally allowed Talrin to understand the black ship correctly. The Empire had seen a terrifying vessel, overwhelming technology, impossible weapons, and assumed war. But the truth was stranger. The Odyssey Dawn was not a predator. It was a lantern carried by explorers walking through the dark. The meeting should have ended peacefully. It almost did. Diplomatic channels stabilized quickly after that. Translation systems improved. Tension decreased. For the first time since the crisis began, Imperial officers and human explorers sat together without fear dominating the room. Almost. Then the station alarms activated. Every head turned instantly. A communications officer rushed into the chamber pale-faced. Admiral, long-range sensor disruption detected. Varen stood immediately. Source. Outer perimeter relay network. Talrin frowned. What kind of disruption? The officer swallowed hard. The same type the Odyssey Dawn detected before entering Imperial territory. Every eye slowly turned toward Captain Ward. And for the first time since first contact, the human captain looked genuinely afraid. Not cautious. Not diplomatic. Afraid. Ward stood instantly. Show me. The tactical display activated across the chamber wall. Sensor relays along the outer frontier blinked red one by one. Entire communication sectors vanished. Navigation systems desynchronized. Deep space scans dissolved into static. The room temperature suddenly felt colder. Ward stepped closer to the display. Her expression tightened immediately. "No!" The human engineer beside her whispered. "That's impossible." Talrin looked sharply toward them. "You recognize this?" Ward answered too quickly. "Yes." Silence crashed across the chamber. Varen stepped forward. "From where?" Ward stared at the failing sensor network for several long seconds before replying. Then quietly, "From regions humanity avoids." Nobody moved, because the fear in her voice changed everything. This wasn't uncertainty anymore. This was recognition. Talrin's stomach tightened slowly. "Captain," Ward interrupted softly, "your border systems weren't malfunctioning when we arrived." The room went silent again. Ward enlarged the distortion patterns. Waveforms spread across the display. Chaotic, violent, wrong. Exactly like the first readings from the Odyssey Dawn. Except larger, much larger. The human navigator whispered, "It followed us." Nobody in the room liked that sentence. At all. Varen's voice hardened immediately. "What followed you?" Ward didn't answer immediately. That hesitation terrified the chamber more than anything else so far. Finally she spoke. "There are regions beyond mapped space where exploration crews occasionally detect anomalies." "Define anomaly." Ward looked exhausted suddenly. "Things that don't behave correctly. Not helpful." Talrin stepped closer. "Captain Ward, we need direct answers now." Ward looked toward her slowly. And for the first time since arriving, the human dropped all diplomatic softness. "Coordinator, humanity explores very far into deep space because curiosity drives us forward." She pointed toward the sensor disruptions. "But curiosity has consequences." Silence. Ward continued carefully. "Several decades ago, long-range survey fleets began reporting impossible encounters near outer dark regions. The display shifted. Human exploration logs appeared. Distorted stars. Sensor blackouts. Ships disappearing. Navigation failures. And recordings that made Imperial scientists visibly pale. Massive shapes moving where no mass should exist. Signals without origin points. Objects larger than moons appearing briefly before vanishing again. The room became deathly quiet. Ward's voice remained controlled. "At first we assumed equipment malfunction. Another image appeared. A destroyed human vessel drifting silently in darkness. Hull twisted inward like crushed paper. No weapon impacts. No reactor damage. Just structural collapse impossible under known physics." Ward continued. "Then exploration groups stopped returning. Nobody spoke. Because the humans describing these events were the same humans whose technology already bordered on godlike compared to the Empire. If they feared something, the implications were catastrophic." Talrin forced herself to remain calm. "You believe one of these anomalies followed your ship here?" Ward looked at the tactical display again. Then answered honestly, "I don't know." Not comforting. At all. The human engineer finally spoke. "Captain, the distortion spread pattern matches Outer Veil incidents almost perfectly." Outer Veil. Another unknown human term. Another terrifying one. Varen narrowed his eyes. "You've fought these things before?" Ward shook her head immediately. "No." A pause. Then quietly, "We survived them." That sentence hit harder than any military threat ever could. Humanity, the civilization capable of impossible exploration ships and terrifying weapons, did not fight whatever existed beyond known space. They endured it. Talrin suddenly understood why the Odyssey Dawn carried enough power to frighten empires. Not for conquest, for survival. The sensor blackout spread farther across Imperial territory. Entire relay sectors vanished now. Emergency alerts flooded the station. Third Fleet shifted to combat readiness automatically. Imperial officers began speaking rapidly across military channels. Ward watched the panic silently for several seconds. Then she said something that froze everyone again. "You're mobilizing incorrectly." Varen turned sharply. "Explain." Ward pointed toward fleet deployment formations. "You're preparing for conventional engagement." And the human captain looked him directly in the eyes. "Conventional engagement assumes the enemy obeys physics." Nobody in the room breathed. Ward stepped toward the tactical table slowly. "If this is what I think it is." She hesitated. "Then weapons alone may not matter." Fear spread visibly across the chamber. Because suddenly the crisis had transformed completely. The Empire thought humanity was the terrifying thing entering their galaxy. Now humanity itself was warning them about something worse. Much worse. The alarms intensified. More systems vanished into static. Then the station lights flickered. Once, twice, and every sensor screen across the command deck went black simultaneously. Complete silence consumed the station. No communications. No tactical feed. Nothing. Then one monitor slowly reactivated by itself. A single distorted image appeared. The room stared in frozen silence. Something enormous moved beyond the stars. Not a ship. Not a station. Something alive. Or something trying very hard to imitate life. The image twisted violently with interference. Too large to comprehend fully. Then it disappeared. The monitor died again. Nobody spoke for several seconds. Finally, the human navigator whispered the words that truly terrified everyone in the room. "It found us." The station remained silent after the image vanished. No alarms. No voices. No movement. Just hundreds of officers and diplomats staring at dead screens while one impossible realization settled across the room. Humanity had not brought the danger. Humanity had been running from it. Captain Ward moved first. "Restore external sensors now." Technicians scrambled instantly. Backup systems rebooted across the station. Emergency power rerouted. Static flooded the displays. Then partial visual feeds returned. And every person in the chamber saw it. Something moved beyond the outer stars. Not traveling. Sliding. Reality itself bent strangely around it. Distances warped. Light stretched incorrectly. The object did not behave like matter. It behaved like an error in the universe. Imperial officers froze. But the humans looked grimly familiar with it. Ward's engineer whispered quietly. "Outer veil signature confirmed." Talrin turned sharply. "You know what that thing is?" Ward answered without looking away from the screen. "No." The answer chilled the room. Because if humanity didn't know, then nobody did. Ward continued quietly. "We only know where it appears. Ships disappear." Third Fleet transmissions returned through heavy static. Admiral Varen's hologram flickered alive above the tactical table. "Coordinator, we have visual contact with the anomaly." His face looked pale. Even battle-hardened officers sounded afraid now. The tactical display stabilized enough to show fleet formations repositioning near the outer sensor collapse zone. 48 Imperial warships armed themselves against something they did not understand. Captain Ward immediately shook her head. "Pull them back." Varen stared at her. "Explain." "Close-range aggression patterns may attract attention." "Attention from what?" Ward looked toward the distorted stars beyond the station viewport. Then quietly, "We never stayed alive long enough to learn." That answer nearly broke the room psychologically. Talrin stepped forward immediately. "Captain Ward, if humanity has encountered these anomalies before, then you must have protocols." Ward nodded once. "Distance. Silence. Minimal energy spikes." Varen frowned. "You avoid combat?" The human captain met his eyes. "Admiral, anything powerful enough to frighten humanity is not something you engage casually." The room went completely still. Because that sentence changed the scale of reality itself. Humanity, the civilization the Empire considered almost godlike, feared this thing. Ward moved toward the tactical controls. "We need to shut down active weapon locks immediately." Several Imperial officers objected instantly. You want us defenseless? Ward's voice sharpened for the first time. I want you alive. Silence followed immediately. The fleet began reducing combat emissions. One by one, active targeting systems powered down. Energy signatures lowered across the sector. Outside the station, the stars continued distorting unnaturally. Then the anomaly moved. Every sensor array screamed simultaneously. Not from attack. From impossibility. Space bent inward around the object like reality itself was trying to escape it. Several Imperial systems crashed instantly. Artificial gravity flickered. Windows trembled. And for one terrible moment, the thing looked directly toward the station. Talrin physically felt it. Not sight. Tension. Ancient. Cold. Wrong. Several officers collapsed unconscious instantly. Blood ran from one technician's nose. Warning sirens detonated across the station. Ward grabbed the tactical console hard enough to whiten her knuckles. Do not engage. Third Fleet held position. Barely. Admiral Varen stared at the tactical feed while every military instinct inside him screamed to fire. But then he looked toward the humans. And what terrified him most was this. They were afraid. Not panicked. Not helpless. Experienced. Like travelers trapped in a storm they had survived before. The anomaly drifted closer. 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 Then suddenly, the Odyssey Dawn moved. The massive black exploration vessel accelerated forward between the anomaly and the station. Imperial officers stared in disbelief. The human ship positioned itself directly in the thing's path. Captain Ward spoke quietly. If it focuses on the strongest energy source, we can redirect its movement. Talrin stared at her. You're using your own ship as bait? Ward didn't answer immediately. Then, that's what exploration ships are for. Outside the station, the black vessel ignited. For the first time since entering Imperial space, the Odyssey Dawn revealed its true power. The stars themselves distorted around it. Massive gravitational waves rippled outward. Entire sensor systems overloaded instantly. The exploration ship transformed from silent wanderer into something terrifyingly ancient and powerful. And yet, against the anomaly, it still looked fragile. The dark shape beyond the stars shifted toward the human vessel. Reality screamed around it. Then both objects vanished. Not exploded. Not jumped. Vanished. The stars stabilized instantly. Sensor systems rebooted. Silence returned. Complete silence. Nobody in the station moved. Nobody spoke. Because the impossible thing was gone. And so was the human ship. Minutes passed. Then an emergency transmission burst through static. Captain Ward's voice. Weak. Distorted. But alive. Anomaly redirected trajectory outbound from inhabited sectors. Static swallowed half the signal. Then, recommend long-range border monitoring expansion beyond current mapped regions. Another burst of interference. Then her final words reached the chamber. Quiet. Exhausted. Human. You're not alone out here. The transmission ended. Silence filled the station again. This time different. Not fear. Understanding. High Coordinator Talrin slowly looked toward the stars beyond the viewport. 48 hours earlier, the Empire believed itself powerful. Civilized. Advanced. Now they understood the truth. The galaxy was far larger than their maps. Far stranger than their science. And somewhere beyond known space, humanity walked willingly into the dark so others would never have to. The Empire had mistaken explorers for conquerors. But explorers were sometimes far braver. Because conquerors only marched toward victory. Explorers marched toward the unknown. And humanity had been doing it alone for a very long time.